The night was heavy with anticipation as my partner and I cruised through the dimly lit streets, the radio crackling with sporadic dispatches. As a rookie cop, I was eager to prove myself, craving the adrenaline rush of a real call. Little did I know, that night would etch a memory in my mind forever. It was nearing midnight when the call came in, a frantic plea for help from an elderly woman reporting strange noises emanating from her basement. My partner, a seasoned officer with years of experience under his belt, shot me a knowing glance as we redirected our patrol car towards the source of the disturbance. The woman's house loomed ahead, a silhouette against the backdrop of the moonlit sky. We approached cautiously, the tension thickening with each step. Knocking on the door, we were greeted by the weary face of Mrs. Thompson, her eyes filled with fear. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. "The noises, they're coming from the basement. I don't know what's down there, but it's not human." My partner exchanged a glance with me before nodding reassuringly at Mrs. Thompson. "Don't worry, ma'am. We'll take care of it. Just stay here and remain calm," he said, his voice steady despite the unease gnawing at my gut. With flashlights in hand, we descended into the darkness of the basement, the musty air heavy with the scent of neglect. The stairs creaked beneath our weight, each step echoing ominously in the silence. My heart raced as we reached the bottom, the narrow corridor stretching out before us like a gateway to the unknown. "Stay close," my partner whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. I nodded, clutching my flashlight tightly as we ventured further into the depths. At first, the basement appeared ordinary, a clutter of boxes and old furniture cast aside. But as we pressed on, a sense of foreboding settled over me like a shroud. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting and contorting in unnatural shapes, and the air grew thick with a noticeable sense of dread. Suddenly, our flashlights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as a primal instinct screamed at me to flee. But my partner pressed on, his determination unwavering in the face of the unknown. That's when we heard it, a low, guttural growl echoing from the depths of the basement. My blood ran cold as fear gripped me in its icy embrace. I exchanged a nervous glance with my partner, the realization dawning on us that we were not alone. With trembling hands, we advanced further into the darkness, the growling growing louder with each step. The basement seemed to stretch on forever, with shadows and secrets that threatened to consume us whole. And then, we stumbled upon it, a sight that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. A maze of tunnels carved into the ground, twisting and turning like the veins of some ancient beast. In the dim light of our flashlights, the walls seemed to pulsate with energy, as if they were alive. My partner cursed under his breath, his voice trembling with fear. "What the hell is this place?" he muttered, his eyes wide with disbelief. But before we could comprehend the true horror of our discovery, a deafening roar erupted from the darkness, a primal, otherworldly sound that sent shivers down my spine. We exchanged panicked glances, the realization sinking in that we were in danger. Without a word, we turned and fled, our footsteps echoing in the darkness as we raced towards the safety of the surface. The growling pursued us, a relentless force of darkness and despair that threatened to consume us whole. As we burst into the light of the basement, I glanced back one final time, my heart pounding in my chest. And in that fleeting moment I saw it, a pair of glowing eyes staring out from the darkness, their gaze filled with hunger and malice. We slammed the basement doors shut behind us, the sound reverberating through the house like a death knell. Mrs. Thompson looked at us with concern, her eyes filled with unspoken questions. But we said nothing, the memory of what lurked beneath her house too terrible to bear. And as we drove away into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had stumbled upon something ancient and evil, something that should never have been disturbed. I remember it like it was yesterday, though it feels like a lifetime ago. It was a chilly autumn evening when the call came in, a routine patrol of the abandoned subway station on the outskirts of town. My partner, Jake, and I were eager to prove ourselves, to show that we had what it takes to handle anything that came our way. As we approached the station, a sense of unease settled over me. The once bustling hub of activity now stood silent and foreboding, its crumbling facade a testament to the passage of time. We parked our cruiser and stepped out into the cool night air, our breath hanging in misty clouds before us. The station loomed before us like a forgotten relic. Graffiti covered the walls, a patchwork of colors and symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The entrance was overgrown with weeds and vines, as if nature itself was reclaiming this lost territory. With our flashlights in hand, we descended into the darkness, the echoes of our footsteps reverberating off the walls. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, and every shadow seemed to conceal unseen horrors. But we pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. As we ventured deeper into the station, a sense of dread washed over me like a tidal wave. The darkness seemed to seep into my bones, filling me with a primal fear that I couldn't shake. Jake must have sensed it too, for he kept glancing over his shoulder, his hand hovering nervously over his gun. Suddenly, we heard it, a faint whispering, like a chorus of voices calling out from the abyss. My heart pounded in my chest as we followed the sound, our footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. It led us deeper into the station, down a narrow staircase. The air grew colder with each step, and a chill ran down my spine as we reached the bottom of the staircase. That's when we saw it, a faint glow emanating from a distant chamber, like a beacon in the darkness. With a silent nod to Jake, we pressed on, our hearts pounding in our chests. As we entered the chamber, a scene of horror unfolded before us. The walls were covered in strange symbols and macabre drawings, illuminated by the flickering light of a single candle. And in the center of the room, a figure stood, its back turned to us, hunched over something on the ground. I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins as we approached, our footsteps echoing off the walls. The figure seemed to sense our presence, for it turned towards us with a slow, deliberate movement. And that's when I saw its face, or rather, what passed for a face. Its features were twisted and contorted, as if molded from nightmares. Its eyes glowed with an unholy fire, burning with a malevolence that sent shivers down my spine. I raised my flashlight, ready to confront whatever horror awaited us. But before we could react, the figure lunged at us with inhuman speed, its movements a blur of motion. I felt a sharp pain in my chest as something slammed into me, knocking the breath from my lungs. I hit the ground hard, my head spinning as I struggled to regain my senses. Through bleary eyes, I saw Jake grappling with the figure, his face a mask of determination. But it was no use. The figure was too strong, too powerful. With a sickening crunch, it delivered a blow that sent Jake sprawling to the ground, his flashlight clattering to the ground. I watched in horror as the figure turned towards me, its eyes burning with a hunger that sent chills down my spine. I scrambled backwards, my heart pounding in my chest as I searched for an escape route. But it was too late. The figure was upon me, its twisted form looming over me like a specter of death. In that moment, I knew fear like I had never known before, a primal, bone-deep terror that threatened to consume me whole. And as the figure reached out a hand towards me, its touch cold as ice, I closed my eyes and prayed for it to end. But just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a chilling whisper. "Welcome to our station." And as I lay there in the darkness, battered and bruised, I knew that some mysteries were best left unsolved, some horrors are best left forgotten. As a seasoned police officer, I thought I had seen it all: murders, kidnappings, even the occasional cult ritual. But nothing could have prepared me for the horrors that awaited me at the old mansion on the edge of town. It all started with a call, a disturbance at the abandoned house, a place whispered about in hushed tones, rumored to be haunted by the spirits of its former inhabitants. Despite the warnings, my partner and I were dispatched to investigate. As we approached the imposing mansion, its crumbling facade seemed to leer down at us. I felt a chill run down my spine as we crossed the threshold, the air heavy with the stench of decay and the echoes of a forgotten past. Every creak of the floorboards seemed to reverberate through my bones, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. "Stay close," My partner whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of our footsteps. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest as we ventured deeper into the darkness. The interior of the house was a maze of crumbling hallways and decrepit rooms, each one more ominous than the last. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes that seemed to follow our every move. We made our way to the basement, a place rumored to be the epicenter of the house's malevolence. The stairs creaked beneath our weight as we descended into the darkness, our flashlights cutting through the gloom like feeble beacons of hope. As we reached the bottom, a wave of dread washed over me, so palpable I could taste it on my tongue. The basement was like something out of a nightmare, a chamber of horrors adorned with arcane symbols and forbidden relics. My skin prickled with unease as I surveyed the scene before us, a sense of impending doom settling over me like a shroud. And then I saw it, a figure lurking in the shadows, its eyes burning with an unholy fire. My blood ran cold as I realized we were not alone, that something sinister lurked in the darkness, waiting to consume us. "Who's there?" my partner called out, his voice trembling with fear. But there was no answer, only the sound of our own ragged breathing echoing through the silence. Suddenly the figure moved, a blur of motion as it lunged towards us with inhuman speed. I barely had time to react before it was upon us, a force of madness that seemed to defy all reason. I stumbled backwards, my heart hammering in my chest as I fumbled for my gun. But before I could draw it, the figure was upon me, its hands like vice grips around my throat. I gasped for air, my vision swimming as I fought against the suffocating pressure. My partner shouted something, but his words were lost in the darkness as everything faded to black. When I came to, I was alone in the basement, the figure nowhere to be seen. My throat burned with pain, and I struggled to push myself upright, the world spinning around me in a haze of confusion. "Partner?" I called out, my voice hoarse and weak. But there was no answer, only the oppressive silence of the empty basement. I stumbled to my feet, my head swimming as I made my way back up the stairs. The mansion loomed above me like a specter in the moonlight, its secrets hidden behind closed doors and boarded-up windows. As I emerged into the night air, I realized that I had escaped the horrors of the house, but at what cost? My partner was gone, taken by whatever malevolent force lurked within those walls. And as I looked back at the mansion one last time, I knew that some doors were better left unopened, some mysteries better left unsolved. But the memory of that night would haunt me forever, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of our reality. The night was draped in an inky darkness, broken only by the soft glow of the moon casting eerie shadows across the landscape. My partner, Detective Carter, and I cruised through the winding roads of the small mountain town, our patrol car cutting through the silence like a knife. It was supposed to be a routine patrol, just another quiet night in a sleepy town nestled amidst the peaks. But as the hours passed, an unease settled over us like a thick fog, suffocating and oppressive. The streets, once bustling with life, now seemed deserted, as if the very soul of the town had been swallowed by the night. Even the usual chatter on the police radio had fallen silent, replaced by an eerie static that sent shivers down my spine. I glanced at Carter, his face etched with concern, mirroring my own apprehension. Something wasn't right, and we both knew it. "We should head back to the station," I suggested, my voice barely above a whisper. "Call for backup." Carter nodded, his grip on the steering wheel tightening with determination. But as he turned the car around, a sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, carrying with it a faint whispering, like the murmurs of lost souls calling out from the darkness. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as a chill ran down my spine. Carter shot me a puzzled look, but before either of us could react, the streetlights began to flicker and die, one by one, plunging us into an oppressive darkness. Panic clawed at my chest as I fumbled for my flashlight, its feeble beam doing little to dispel the shadows that seemed to close in around us. The air grew thick with tension, every sound magnified 100-fold in the silence. "Carter, what the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fear. But he had no answers, his own confusion mirroring my own. We were alone, adrift in a sea of darkness with no beacon to guide us home. With no other option, we pressed on, the faint glow of the moon our only source of light as we navigated the winding streets of the town. Each turn seemed to lead us deeper into the heart of darkness, the buildings looming like silent sentinels, their windows devoid of life. And then, as if emerging from a nightmare, we stumbled upon the town square, a barren wasteland strewn with decaying corpses, their vacant eyes staring into oblivion. My stomach churned at the sight, bile rising in my throat as a wave of nausea washed over me. Carter's grip tightened on his gun, his knuckles white with tension as he scanned the empty square for any sign of life. But there was nothing, only the oppressive silence of the night. "What the hell happened here?" he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, my mind reeling with the implications of what we had discovered. This wasn't just a town, it was a graveyard, a tomb for the souls lost to whatever darkness had consumed it. And then, as if on cue, a chill wind swept through the square, carrying with it a haunting melody that sent shivers down my spine. It was a song of sorrow, a lament for the lost souls trapped within the town's twisted embrace. Carter and I exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between us. We had to get out of here, before whatever darkness had claimed this town claimed us too. But as we turned to leave, a voice pierced the silence, a single word, whispered on the wind like a curse. "Welcome." I froze, my blood turning to ice as I turned to face the source of the voice. And there, standing in the center of the square, was a figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes burning with an unholy fire. Before I could react, it vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a chilling whisper that echoed in the depths of my soul. We fled that town, our hearts pounding in our chests, as we raced towards the safety of the outside world. But the memory of that night will haunt me forever, a reminder that some towns are best left forgotten. The forest was alive with whispers, its ancient trees looming overhead like silent sentinels guarding dark secrets. My partner, Detective Miller, and I were called to investigate a string of disappearances that had plagued our small town. As we ventured deeper into the woods, a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy cloak, suffocating and oppressive. The moon cast its pale light through the dense canopy, casting eerie shadows that danced along the forest floor. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent shivers down my spine, as if the very forest itself was watching our every move. "Keep your wits about you, Johnson," Miller said, his voice low and gravelly. "We don't know what we're dealing with out here." I nodded, trying to quell the rising tide of fear threatening to overwhelm me. We pressed on, following the faint trail that led deeper into the heart of the forest. The air grew thick with the scent of earth and decay, and a sense of dread settled over us like a heavy fog. Suddenly, we stumbled upon a clearing, a tableau of death and despair illuminated by the pale light of the moon. Bodies lay scattered across the forest floor, their faces frozen in expressions of terror and agony. Blood stained the ground, pooling beneath twisted limbs and broken bodies. My heart hammered in my chest as I surveyed the scene, a cold knot of fear tightening in the pit of my stomach. "What could have done this?" I whispered, unable to tear my eyes away from the grisly sight before me. Miller shook his head grimly, his jaw clenched with determination. "I don't know, but we need to find out before it's too late." We moved cautiously through the clearing, our senses on high alert for any sign of danger. That's when we heard it, a low, guttural growl echoing through the darkness, sending a chill down my spine. I gripped my flashlight tightly, my knuckles white with fear, as we ventured deeper into the forest. The trees seemed to close in around us, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers to snatch us away. Every sound, every shadow, seemed to come alive with malice, as if the very forest itself was conspiring against us. Suddenly, we stumbled upon a cave, an ominous black hole gaping in the earth like the maw of some ancient beast. Miller and I exchanged wary glances, our breaths coming in shallow gasps, as we cautiously approached the yawning abyss. "Stay close," Miller muttered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. We descended into the darkness, our flashlights cutting through the shadows like feeble beacons of hope in a sea of darkness. The air grew colder as we ventured deeper into the depths of the cave, the sound of dripping water echoing off the walls like the mournful wails of the damned. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down on me, suffocating and oppressive, as if threatening to swallow me whole. Suddenly, we stumbled upon a chamber, a horror illuminated by the faint glow of our flashlights. Bones littered the ground, their bleached white surfaces gleaming in the dim light, while strange symbols adorned the walls, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. My blood ran cold as I realized the truth. This was no ordinary cave, but a sanctuary for something ancient and violent, something that should never have been disturbed. Before we could react, a monstrous figure emerged from the shadows, a twisted abomination of flesh and bone, its eyes glowing. I could feel the icy grip of fear tightening around my heart as it loomed over us, its presence filling the chamber with a suffocating sense of dread. With a guttural roar, it lunged at us, its claws slashing through the darkness with deadly precision. Miller and I fought with all our strength, our weapons flashing in the dim light as we struggled to hold our ground against the relentless onslaught. But it was no use. We were outnumbered, outmatched, by a force beyond our comprehension. As darkness closed in around me, I knew that this would be our final stand, our last desperate bid for survival in a world consumed by madness and despair. And as the darkness swallowed me whole, I prayed that someone, anyone, would find us before it was too late. But deep down, I knew that our fate had already been sealed, that in the end, we were nothing more than prey, lost in the endless expanse of the haunted forest.